Hello, everyone, and welcome to our latest episode of the Skin Wellness Pro Show. I'm Rachael Pontillo, president and co-founder of the Nutritional Aesthetics Alliance, and I'm so excited for today's episode. But before we dive into that, I would love to introduce you to my co-host, our education specialist, Tara Swagger. Hey, Tara.
Hello, hello. Thanks for having me here today. This is very exciting.
Always a pleasure. Well, we have a special guest today, and this special guest is someone who has been a longtime colleague and friend of mine, as well as one of our wonderful and generous and brilliant advisory board members for the Nutritional Aesthetics Alliance, Jennifer Fugo, who is a clinical nutritionist empowering adults who have been failed by conventional medicine, who can relate to that, to beat chronic skin and unending gut challenges. She has experience working with conditions such as eczema, psoriasis, rosacea, dandruff, and hives, with clientele ranging from regular folks to celebrities and professional athletes. Jen also founded her own line of skincare and supplements available at quellshop.com, specifically for people struggling with these chronic skin issues. She holds a master's degree in human nutrition from the University of Bridgeport and is a licensed dietitian, nutritionist, and certified nutrition specialist. Her work has been featured on Dr. Oz, Reuters, Yahoo, CNN, many podcasts and summits. She's also a faculty member on the Learn Skin platform, Amazon bestselling author, and the host of the wildly popular Healthy Skin Show podcast, which you guys should all check out if you haven't already. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we at the Skin Wellness Pro Show really love to have real conversations that are relevant to practitioners of things that they're encountering either in the treatment room or during their coaching or consulting sessions. And I'm sure you can relate to this, as we even said in your bio, how you'll come across a client who has something that they've been struggling for a really long time with their skin, and they'll bring it to a session with questions, with frustration. They've been given medications, and sometimes the medications work for a while and then they just stop. Sometimes the medications actually make things worse. And then what are we to do? How can we support that client when that client has already done the, oh, well, you really should check with your licensed healthcare professional kind of canned response that we're supposed to give? So that's really what I would love for us to talk about today. And Jennifer, you're obviously seeing clients kind of from the inside out side of things. And obviously you do have the skincare line, so we're helping with the topical aspects as well. And Tara, I love that you're on this conversation with us because you are an esthetician in practice and you are having these conversations in the treatment room and physically looking at the skin as you have your people on the table. So I'm really interested to hear you guys kind of interface about this. But overall, I would just love to maybe start, Jen, with some of the most common skin situations that come into your practice, even after they've been to an esthetician or been to a dermatologist. What does that look like? Where are these clients at? What are their biggest frustrations?
That is a great question, to know where are they on their journey, because a lot of people have seen multiple doctors. They have also done extensive research themselves, and they've read books. There are books on their particular skin issues. They've read blogs. So I do think, as I don't normally say this, but as I'm talking, it might also be good to figure out from talking to them how much they've dove into the research, if we put that in air quotes, on their particular skin condition, because that may signal to you that they really are ready. They just need more help in directing what they need to do. So there's a little tidbit right there. But most of the time, my clients have tried different diets already. They've probably tried multiples of them, or on the flip side, they have a history of eating disorders of some sort, whether they had anorexia at one point, then maybe binge eating, etc. And they're nervous. They see that being recommended frequently, and they're like, I'm not really comfortable doing that, and I don't know what other options I have. And so that is usually one area that is very telling that somebody wants to start taking action. They want to do more than just what the medical suggestions are, but they don't know what to do. And they're getting really lost and stuck at the diet piece. Because we all know, like, you go to the doctors, they're going to be like, get rid of your, fragrances and swap out your detergent. Like, they've done all of that basic stuff already. And we do have clients that never really changed over to more natural skincare products. We also, as you know, Rachael, because we've collaborated on some cases.
Yeah.
We have some people that are extremely sensitive to everything.
Yeah.
Even
they can't use anything. My first job is to take them off of anything and then start by introducing like one ingredient at a time. And it's not often, like I would say that's rarer, but through our collaboration, it's truly been eye-opening to see exactly what point people have gotten to because of these issues.
Yeah. And so they may be interested in like deeper testing. They may have had blood work run. They might not have, but they're interested in it and they're not sure what could be helpful on their journey. They may be interested in like stool tests or some sort of gut test. And so usually at that point, they want some personalized direction at the least on what else could be going on, because they feel like the model, this idea that it's either an allergen in their environment, food, or a detergent, or they got bad genes. Like, those are really not, or stress. We'll just put stress in air quotes because stress is such a, I don't know. It doesn't mean, it means things, but then it doesn't. It's so vague. And so that's where usually my clients come to me, is that they want some sort of sensible way forward. And we are very clear in that my practice generally does not put a person on an elimination diet unless absolutely warranted. Like, for example, there's some instances where a low histamine diet may make sense, but we're very cautious and judicious about how extensive that diet is based on what the person has going on. And so if they're really into, I want to deal with this with diet, well, if they want to just do elimination diets, we're probably not the right place for them. And I have colleagues that do that. So, it's important that they vet the person out, but that's usually where people have started. It's not like I got a rash and I've been dealing with this for 3 months and I want to know what it is. I commonly have, like, even the client that I talked to today, he's had rashes since, I guess, if I'm thinking about how old he was, he's probably had rashes starting about 12 to 14 years ago. So he's been dealing with it for that period of time. We've had some clients that are in their 50s and they had it since they were a baby. Wow. So it's usually fairly a chronic problem. And depending on the severity will determine like how, I hate to say this, but in some regards, it's the truth, how desperate they are to figure out what's going on because the current management tools aren't working well enough.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. And we always give the caveat that Western medicine and pharmaceuticals have their time and their place, but when it comes to chronic situations, they really don't have a lot to offer in most cases. Which is where practitioners like you and, some of our practitioners, the Nutritional Aesthetics Alliance, this is where we can really help to support these clients in making changes that can help them build a foundation that is conducive to them actually getting those results finally. So Tara, I would love to flip the conversation over to you.
Jen, it's so interesting to hear about your clients and when they come in, and that you find that a lot of them have already been working on trying to find answers and that type of thing. Because in my practice, I find that when someone comes to me, they often haven't done most of that. And maybe it could be just my demographic too, because I think obviously that makes a difference depending on where you are. And if you're doing a lot of virtual, maybe people are finding you sort of at the long haul sort of spot in their journey. But I find in aesthetics that, people come because it's a skin issue. They have a skin issue, right? So they went to the dermatologist gave them a cream. Usually that's all they get there. So then they come to me and they're expecting when they come to me that somehow I've got the actual answer in like a little package for them. But I think in aesthetics, and even though I am also a holistic health practitioner, clients are not as educated. They haven't tried all the things. So it's an interesting dynamic about where your clients are coming from, because they're clearly at a different place. And so in aesthetics, I find that it's harder to integrate the idea of their lifestyle having a part in exasperating whatever their issues are, and oftentimes the clients that tell me, oh, I've had this since I was a baby, they have a mindset that that's just what it is and that's forever. And so even when you want to make suggestions or try to guide them, a lot of times they're kind of like, I don't think that's really going to do it, right? Because I've had it my whole life. So like you said, in genes, like when people grab onto the ideology that it's their genes, they then sort of move in a direction where if it's my genes, I can't really do anything about it, type of thing. And also I think when they come from the dermatologist, their dermatologist has literally given them a cream and been like, oh, well, that's just how your skin is, so you have to deal with it. So I think it's an interesting dynamic. And I wish I had more clients that did come with sort of maybe more trial and error, or more focus on the fact that maybe what they're doing in their diet or their lifestyle mattered. Because I think for estheticians, we're kind of in a different spot. So we're not getting those clients that feel that way. And it's a very difficult space, I think. But I know, like with nutritional aesthetics, as we work with these students, it's so important for us to gain more knowledge in this department, because they're coming in for their skin issue to see us. And then we know all these components matter. But it's, I think, a more difficult space for us to create that relationship where they're willing to do the things that we're saying, or that we're suggesting, or we're explaining to them. So it's kind of an interesting space, with the kind of clients that you have. But do you have suggestions maybe that you can give estheticians or people that are in this space? I mean, I'll send a lot of my clients to the naturopath. I always, say I work with a local naturopath, so I want my clients there because I want her to confirm in lab work the things that I'm seeing in a skin map, but not everybody has that. And so maybe you have some suggestions on where the estheticians, where it's a little more difficult, can actually be more thriving in that department.
Sure. So the first thing to realize that everybody's journey is different and that there are different stages. It's very similar to when you think about your own health journey. There's a period of time where you just are willing to accept whatever your doctor told you or you read online on, say, WebMD. And then there comes a certain point when a person has to make a choice. They literally, and I hate to say this, but this is the truth, is that people have to hit a breaking point where they will either decide to just suck it up and this is how it is and I'm stuck this way, or they will get to a place where it is the pain and the discomfort and maybe the embarrassment and the lack of confidence and all of these pain points and suffering points are untenable. And continuing to live with that is actually worse than trying to figure it out. And so everyone has their own. They may get to that point, they may not. And you know what? It's okay. I like to hold space for people's journey because I don't think that every person should go the route of doing an alternative thing. Like, some people just are not wired that way. They want immediate quick fixes. That's what their constitution and the way they show up is. And that's okay. We have to respect every person's journey. And where you can plant seeds. And I think that's the more important thing, is how can an esthetician plant seeds that offers that person a peek through the crack in the door, right? And maybe in their mind goes, oh, wait, maybe there is something else going on, is what educational information could you provide them that is written in a way that they can understand, that speaks to them directly, and doesn't necessarily dismiss everything that they believe? Because I think that's oftentimes hard when people are confronted with this whole idea that, you go to some websites and some websites are like, everything you've been told is a lie. And for
It's
some people,
wrong.
right. For some people, they're like, I don't want to believe that every doctor has lied to me and that it undermines the trust that they have in their care team. And for some people, that's all they have. And they're not willing to break with that. So like one of the beautiful things about, like Rachael mentioned, the Healthy Skin Show, is that the episodes are geared towards the person, the patient, the caregiver who is sitting there, maybe in the dermatologist office, who is like, I wonder if there's something else that I could do. And they're asking that question, but whatever route they choose to go and how deep they choose to go down this rabbit hole is really entirely up to them. But that's where maybe you, as the esthetician, find resources, because I have resources too. I mean, it's like, if I think I'm dealing with mast cell activation syndrome, if I think I'm dealing with more serious Epstein-Barr virus reactivation, like those are things outside of my scope of practice, but I don't not offer someone a resource simply because it will send them elsewhere. I do them a disservice by doing that. And so just like I have a toolbox of resources for people who are dealing with more serious things, I would say if estheticians are feeling like they're stuck, that's where you want to look, is build your toolbox of potential resources to direct people. And that may mean that you have like, I have estheticians that listen to the Healthy Skin Show and are like, this is like one of the most educational things, even for me. I had no idea about this. And so if you have a client that's like, hey, I have rashes in these particular areas, there's an episode for that. You can send them the link to that and say, hey, here you go. Or chronic hives, I've got an episode of like why that could happen beyond what the doctor is telling you. And it's not to say that they have to come and see me or your naturopath or whatever, because like also the other thing to consider is that some people might not mesh with the personality of one person. And there's a lot of practitioners specifically in the nutrition space. So registered dietitians and CNSs that can work virtually and don't have to live in your state. So NDs, so naturopathic doctors, are licensed by states similar to doctors like
And
DOs.
not all of them.
And MDs, right. And so some states do not allow naturopaths to practice at all. And what happens if they go to the naturopath and they're like, whoa, it happens, let's be honest, naturopath may be way too woo-woo for them. It happens. Sometimes there's a personality conflict. I'm not for everybody. There are people that I can just tell you right out the gate, we're not going to get along. It happens. And it's okay. That's why there's other people. So we have these individuals as part of our toolbox to say, hey, if this person, go check them out. Here's a video you can watch or an interview. If you feel like after you start to get to know them, they feel like a good fit, this might be a good person to work with. If not, here's some other individuals. These people you could just see virtually. Like I work with people all over the world as a result, because I just do virtual. But I do think the toolbox piece is really, really important, because that's where you don't have to undermine what they've been told in the past. You're literally saying, okay, I hear what you're saying. And you might want to read this article and just see what jumps out at you and give them the permission to digest that information, to think about it. And maybe they're going to come back and go, gee, there was this one thing in that article and I sat on it and thought about it for a few days and I had no idea, but that's happening to me. And so a lot of times it's just about cracking open the door and seeing if that person is ready to maybe just put their hand slightly through. And as they become increasingly interested, you're just offering them the option to go deeper, and they will at their own pace. I think that's one of the really important things, is to not push people to do things that they're just not comfortable with, or they're not sure of the relevance of why this is helpful. That's why it's easy to not see the value in it, because they really don't understand how it's even relevant to what they're dealing with.
I think
I don't know
that's
if that
really,
helps.
yeah, I think that's
Totally.
really valuable. Thank you.
Mhm.
I think that this whole conversation about meeting people where they're at, and in order to do that, we really do need to take the time in consultation to ask the right questions and ask, what have they already done? What's that been like for them? What's been frustrating for you in the past? Where have you seen some level of success? Just gauge how they got here, whether, Tara, it's someone who is maybe not prioritizing the rash as much as maybe, their hyperpigmentation or their fine lines, but it still comes up in conversation. Or Jen, where you're meeting someone after they've been on a journey for a while and they have that frustration and that hopelessness, and I can so relate with that. So I think asking the right questions, really taking time to do that consultation and read between the lines, listen between the words, read the body language. I think these are all things that practitioners need to start doing more of. But the thing you said about just validating that frustration and not doing the fear mongering thing where, oh, well, everything you've been told is wrong, or that was bad advice. You're right. That's not helpful. Nobody wants to be told that they got bad advice from someone that they trusted, because then it makes them doubt their own judgment. And if they don't trust themselves, then it's really hard for them to value the work that's needed to make those positive changes.
It is. And I also think too, it makes them distrust the conventional solutions, because while we each can hold our own opinion about whether we personally would partake in topical steroids, ketoconazole shampoo, whatever it may be, that for a particular skin issue, the reality of it is that it is not fair. And this is my belief, so everyone can have their own, but I don't think it's right that we pass along this sense of shame and judgment about what the person has tried or what they feel is appropriate for their toolbox. Because you can also, and I think this is really important for estheticians to know, because this is not something that I was schooled on. This is stuff that I had to learn through experiences, that you can do the alternative things with the conventional medication. And some people need both at the same time, because the level of suffering that they experience is too great to be able to just do alternative stuff, because the alternative stuff is like the scenic route. It's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah.
And to tell somebody, oh, no, you just have to change your diet. No, you just have to do all these things. They need to be a mother, a father, a caregiver, sister, who knows? They have to go to work. If they have a huge flare up of symptoms because now all of a sudden they become afraid of medication that is being recommended to them, there is a lot of stigma within going to Facebook groups and see one person post about any of the medications, Protopic, topical steroids, all these things, and you will see a litany of shame and fear mongering that happens as a result of that. And yet that person can't be a functioning human being. And you can do a lot of these things at the same time if need be. And I don't think that we should put our personal feelings on top of that, because it also, again, undermines the other parts of their care team. I don't believe in that. Like, I've just found a way to creatively support people with whatever choices they need to make in order to have a life. Because guess what? We don't get that time back. You don't get the time that you suffer back. Nobody gets a cookie for it, right? We all think like, oh, well, if you just detox it out, right? But like the reality is that nobody gets those years of suffering, of not wanting to be in you don't get those photographs and those family moments back. You don't get any of that stuff back. And so I think we need to find ways to be supportive, to help inspire people to take those baby steps, obviously within our scope of practice, because that is important. You know, I had lectured and Rachael had schooled me very well on what the scope of an esthetician is.
I'm
and
bad cop, essentially.
It is so important because you don't want to cause harm. And there's a lot of things, like I see coaches online. There's one coach now, it was like and I know her and I know she means well, but she's like, oh, well, if you want one of those like Ozempic things, you can just like do berberine. And I'm like, you, first of all, you're a fitness coach. Second of all, if somebody's on diabetic medication, they can't take berberine because it could cause their blood sugar to drop too low. Like, do you want to harm that person? Because that could be like a serious medical issue. So we want to be very cautious when we're going outside of our scope to not cause harm. And that's a really big deal. So that's why I was saying, like, having this network and knowing like what books to suggest, what, you know, like some people like to listen, some people like to watch. Like maybe you give somebody, like, you're like, hey, I want you to use, you know, you give them their routine or whatever you want them to do. But part of it is like, hey, and by the way, I need you before the next session to watch this 10-minute video or like read the transcript or however you want to consume it, you consume it. And then I want to talk to you about it next week and just like how it landed with you. And that may be enough to give somebody this baby step, right? It doesn't have to be that the bridge is built in a day. The bridge may take months for someone to get there, and that's okay because it's their timeline, and whatever their timeline looks like, it looks like. I also think that it would, and this is just me saying this as a clinical nutritionist, I would love if estheticians reached out more, especially if they had specific training or experience with certain skin conditions. They reached out to other nutrition professionals because like, I can't recommend, like, people ask me all the time, what should I wash my face with? What should I do? I'm not trained in any of that. And I think that's a really missed opportunity for collaboration where people in different fields could actually work together and more collaboratively. I get asked all the time if there's someone that they can talk to help with their topical stuff. And my toolkit in that, I'm going to be honest, is real slim pickings because I don't have the time to go out and vet every single person. Right. So I do think that estheticians could also make a point to, if you have an experience with acne or rosacea or whatever, and you find practitioners online who have maybe a clinical practice, introduce yourself. Let us know what you're doing. That way, if we know somebody in your area, or if you do virtual or whatever it may be, that way we can support people better. Because a lot of times, I don't know, I give the few things and I'm like, I'm sorry, you have to go back and speak to your doctor, or, you know, I'll ask Rachael, like, who do you know in the area? Like, you know,
well, I think that's a definite gap. There's no doubt about it because, well, I'm lucky to have somebody to work with locally in my area. There's a lot of the estheticians that I speak to a lot. They don't, and I keep encouraging them, like, meet these people for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. Like, go and meet a naturopath or somebody in the wellness nutrition world that you can get to know for your health practices. And then you have somebody, but that's a definite gap for sure, because I think that is exactly what happens when you're trying to work within scope and you're an esthetician, is that, you know, you can see things that you believe are probably the case and you want to give them tools from the toolbox, but you also want them to have another person that can be their resource. And so I definitely think there's a gap for us there. And hopefully we can continue to move to bridge that, you know, with nutritional aesthetics. I think we're encouraging a lot of those students to do that, you know, reach out to people like you so they do have that. And then that's interesting that you just said that you wish that you had more estheticians that you could refer to, because I think that's probably the piece that's also missing. It seems like in medical a lot is that, if you go to the dermatologist, I know at least in my area, they go to the dermatologist and they're not given that other part of the support. So for example, if they're dealing with a major case of psoriasis and they're seeing the doctor for that, they're not having the resource to say, hey, we want to send you to the local esthetician. I find that sometimes to be difficult, trying to work with some of the medical professionals because they just don't seem to be as excited about kind of creating that relationship. Like, whereas we're like, okay, well, we want that because we want to be able to give our client all the resources that can benefit them. But yeah,
I can tell you, Tara, the same goes for nutrition. They never refer. They do not.
No, I'm certain of that. I'm certain of that.
I think I've had the entire time I've been practicing, I have one dermatologist that consistently refers to me, but that's about it. And most of the other derms that have even been on the Healthy Skin Show very rarely will ever send me any of their patients. It's because they're so used to doing things in-house. And if they are more conventional, a lot of times the mindset is, well, you don't take insurance, which I don't. And I'm very upfront about that.
Right.
So they're not going to want to pay. So they make the judgment ahead of time because they themselves may not see the value of that. And so I think where it's nice to say, and I used to get really upset about this, like, it's not fair, they don't refer. But the truth is, then let's collaborate where people are open to collaborating, right? And so I know that tons of nutrition professionals are open to doing that. Yeah. And there's no lack of clients. I have so many clients. There's month-long waits to get into my practice. And I don't even ever I don't even ever have to say, hey, I have one spot this month. I never even advertise for my practice. So, and I don't say that to brag. It's just that for anybody feeling like there's not enough people, there are tons of people. And so it is partly a mindset issue, but it's also creating the right marketing, to knowing how to support people appropriately to get the referrals, even from family members and friends. And it's a skill. It's a skill that we learn. And I do want to just mention too, I know for newbies, and I was like this before, that I would get really turned off if I tried to like reach out one time and didn't hear anything. I'm super busy. I have 6 inboxes that I deal with on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. I might see an email and then I meant to respond and forgot, or I just didn't have time. Be consistent. I have learned the art of being relentlessly persistent. And guess what? If I don't get a response via email, I'm going to message them on Instagram, and I'm going to start sharing their stuff and respectfully commenting. Don't do the whole like, hey, I sent you an email and you don't respond.
Right.
And don't hijack their posts.
No, don't hijack.
Yeah.
But like, there are ways, like, be persistent and be like, I can see this. I really believe in this potential connection. I don't know where it will go, right? Because we never know where it's going to go. So doing it just because you think you're going to get clients is probably not the best reason to do it. But find people that you really feel like, hey, I feel like our philosophies mesh. I have experience dealing with these types of issues. I'm in this area, or maybe I work virtually, and I'm open to and like, I'm always open to that. Rachael knows.
Yeah.
I'm always like, do you have somebody that'll make this type of skincare? Do you know somebody who can do this? Like, we're always looking for that type of support. And I think there's a lot of collaborative effort. And when you're new and when you're feeling really overwhelmed, it's just like, I think sometimes the things that appear like they're not going well add up, and it just all looks like it's not worth it to do, but it really is. I mean, to be honest with you, there have been podcasts that at this point in time, so I am now recording my 300th episode. We've had over 1 million downloads, right?
Oh my
so I've
gosh,
done a
amazing.
lot of stuff, right? And yet there are podcasts I can't even get on still. And guess what? I'm doing the same things. I'm following up. I'm being present in their, responding and reacting to their Instagram stuff. If I see them in person, hey, do you mind if I get in touch with you? Shooting them emails, being consistent and following up. And you know what? The right opportunity will present itself. If I know somebody who knows us, can you connect us? And just being persistent. So to act like it's just you, or to think like it's just you. And I don't mean you, Tara, or you, Rachel. I mean just you in general.
Yeah.
It's not. We all have to do this, no matter where we are in the point in our career, and no matter how many people we know. So I just don't want somebody to feel like, because I have been there where it's like we feel like nobody's responding, it's not working. It's not. It's just be persistent,
Yeah,
respectfully and relentlessly persistent.
that's such great advice. And I think something that I'd like to add to that is make sure that your website, like your about section, your homepage, your social media profiles, make clear who you are, who you help, how you help, and something about your philosophy, because I can say that there are so many differences in philosophy on the aesthetic side of things. I mean, we have the holistic people, we have the super medical people, we have people who are somewhere in between, we have, the super dark green purists. And then on the nutrition side, we have the very conventionally minded dietitians who are still really practicing standard American dietetics. And then you have on the other end of things, the more woo-woo kind of health coach person. And then you have this whole spectrum of the integrative and the functional in between that. So I think it's really helpful to identify what that philosophy is so that people can identify you as a potential referral partner more easily and vice versa. Because I remember, the first time that I referred a client to who I thought would have been a good referral for a holistic dermatologist. I met him at a conference that we both spoke at. It was a holistic skincare conference. He sounded very, educated as he was speaking. And I was, proud to refer my client to him because we just weren't getting results. We had just hit a wall. She was frustrated. I was frustrated. And I realized, you know what? It's time to accelerate this to, I don't want to say like a higher level professional, but this woman needed medical care. So I placed a phone call to this dermatologist. I gave, detail, as much detail as I was consented to give from the client, background information. And I was assured that she would be taken care of. But I come to find out later that the dermatologist completely undermined everything I had been working on with her, every recommendation I had made, and then proceeded to charge her $1,100, not thousand, $1,100, which is still bad, for supplements and his skincare products, which ultimately still left her frustrated, out of pocket, and without results, because I had made the assumption that just because we spoke at a similar conference that we were probably like-minded, when clearly we may have had some similar philosophies, but he was clearly not the right person for me to refer to because he didn't respect what I did. So I think really putting out there who you are, what you believe, so that you can make yourself more identifiable, and then doing your homework, reading up on people, look at what they're commenting on other people's social media or how they're responding on their own social media, so that you can get a sense of who they are and what their vibe is, I think is really important. Because when you do make a referral, it does ultimately reflect on your reputation because you're the one who's choosing to refer that client to that.
Well,
practitioner.
it's interesting because what you said, Jen, about going with baby steps is such a great, important thing to keep remembering, because people like that person that left you and then went to someone else, now they're getting this $1,100 protocol. And that's kind of what happens to a lot of clients, is they end up being a little bit victimized, right? They go from one place, right? And that's what you were saying before, Jen, like the baby steps. And that is definitely the best advice, because you definitely want that client to not jump into something all new, then not have it work, then go to the next person and sort of be victimized again by like the idea of selling or buy me or buy this whole new frame. And so I think that speaks to that conversation that you just had about doing the baby steps, is that's important.
And also too, one thing that I also tell all of my clients is that if I make a referral to a person, I will say to them, I do not know exactly how they're going to respond to you. I don't know exactly how they practice. So I'm just like, do your homework on them ahead of time, because I don't want you to come back to me and be upset by something that they say. I'm not, like, I can't control how somebody else practice. I really can't. And I also can't control how their, office staff and everything is set up. I honestly don't know, unfortunately. And I think that when you just, like I've noticed when we have clients that listen, like the gentleman I was talking about earlier today, who I met with, who, he listened to, I don't know how many episodes of my podcast before he made the decision to finally sign up, because he felt like at that point he knew me well enough and our philosophies meshed well enough that we made sense. Whereas when we have clients who like heard one episode and they were like, oh my gosh, I need to talk to this person. A lot of times it's a real wonky conversation. They don't understand what our philosophy is. They don't get it. And it's like pulling teeth. And I'm just like, no, I'm not interested in this. Like, I agree. I just want to underscore, Rachael, what you said. I do think it's really wise to be clear on your website about, because like, that's the first place I'm going to look. I am going to check out somebody's Instagram for sure, because I want to see what you're writing and saying, because if you're making audacious claims about things that are inappropriate, that could jeopardize me and my licensure. So I have to stay within scope of practice, and I take scope of practice extremely seriously. So if you're stepping way outside of it, then I'm not going to refer clients to you, because I don't want to end up being part of somebody getting really upset and getting myself in trouble. But I do think it's important, because I look at the website, the About Me page is really important. I cannot tell you enough and underscore that enough to clearly have it outlined. What is your training? Just saying you're like, I'm a holistic health practitioner. I don't know what that means. It doesn't mean anything. I need to know, what is your training? What's your certification in? When did you get it done? Because if you got it done this year versus like 5 years ago, that speaks to how much experience you have. And so it does really matter what it says on that page. And just also, I think, one question that Rachael had posed to me before this conversation, which I think is really valuable to underscore, is that it is also crucial that you understand as a referrer what the scope of practice is for different like integrative practitioners, because like a health coach, for example, is not allowed to recommend nor change or tweak supplements or diet. Believe it or not, any type of elimination diets, diet suggestions, aside from, hey, could we add in, maybe we try to increase nutrient density by adding this. Like, you cannot make any suggestions in terms of meal plans or anything as a health coach, and you're not allowed to work with supplements and testing. And so just realize that if you're referring to somebody who does not have the scope of practice and they do something that gets them in trouble, they could come back after you for making that referral. So we want to be really careful as to whom we're referring to for a multitude of reasons. One of which is, obviously you don't want somebody to send somebody someplace and they're doing things they don't have the appropriate training to be working in, and then your client gets really mad at you for making that referral. So there is a big difference between a health coach and those that are actual, like a CNS, so a certified nutrition specialist, or a registered dietitian. We have vastly different training. And there is a reason why we have a different scope of practice due to the level of training and the requirements, like you for CEs and things like that, that we have to do in order to stay certified and licensed within our states and stay within the scope of practice.
And I think a really good analogy to that on the aesthetic side of things, aesthetics is starting to become a little bit of a Wild West in some states. Some states are taking away licensure, which means that anybody's going to be able to call themselves anything and do anything without oversight. And that's a little bit terrifying, because there are treatments and products in aesthetics that can do harm. So on the skincare side of things, you have your licensed esthetician, you have a cosmetologist who might have more hours of training, but most of that training has been on hair. They get very little bit of aesthetics in their curriculum in most states. You also have estheticians in some states that are required to have over 1,000 hours of education and clinical training before they can get their license. Whereas here in Pennsylvania, guess what? We only have 300. So it's really different state to state. And then you want to look and see what kind of continuing education these estheticians have had, because it's something that is not required state by state. We are partnered with the NCEA, who has a national certification for aesthetics, where they do require recertification every 2 years, and we do provide CEs for that. But not everybody is nationally certified. And, aside from estheticians and cosmetologists, you've also got, your beauty advisors from your MLM companies who they think they're very well trained. Of course, they're very well trained on their brand, but beyond that, they can't actually legally put their hands on someone's face because they're not licensed to do that. So what people call themselves, skin therapist, beauty therapist, spa therapist. I mean, Tara, how many different titles are there for, this side of things? I think it's equally important for nutritionists and other practitioners to look for the education, the continuing education that somebody who's claiming to, be licensed to work on the skin does have. Yeah. Well, I think this has been a really helpful conversation, ladies. And Jen, thanks so much for being here. Before we let you go, I would love for you to just share where people can connect with you. I know you've got the Healthy Skin Show and you've got your website. You're very active on social media. So give us all your details and we'll be sure to include them in the show notes as well.
Well, you can find me at healthyskinshow.com. The podcast is available on every podcast app. It's free to listen to. And it's also on YouTube. So super easy, depending on how you want to consume it. We also do full transcripts if you prefer to read. And then I am very active on Instagram. So you can find me at Jennifer Fugo. And if you just do to healthyskinshow.com, it'll take you right to my website and you can find all the information about different chronic skin issues, my approach to things, lots of resources. And if you're interested in connecting, please do. I'd love to hear from you guys if you have any questions or further comments on this type of topic, because I do think collaboration is so needed and really, really important.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today, Jen, and thanks for all you have done to support the Nutritional Aesthetics Alliance over the past several years that you've been on our advisory board We appreciate you very much. And thank you so much, Tara, for joining us today, as always. And before I let all of you go, I just want to remind you that we are also available everywhere that you get your podcasts. We are also on YouTube at Nutritional Aesthetics, and you can come on over to our website at skinwellnesspro.com to read multiple blog posts. We also have all of our podcast episodes, the videos, the audios, the show notes in the blog. So come on over and make sure that while you're there, you leave us a comment, let us know how you liked it, what you'd like to see from us, get involved. And we look forward to bringing you a new episode very, very soon. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.